All right, folks. For chapter 16, this runs some of it concurrently with the Civil War. Some of it starts before, and quite a bit of it runs afterwards. And it's results really of the Civil War itself. Here's what we discover. Going into the Civil War, we have the advent of the Industrial Revolution. And really, it's the second industrial revolution at this particular point. Britain's already had the industrial revolution. They've already bought into manufacturing. They've already bought into industry. They've already hit the steam engine, and so they have invented all the stuff or innovated, because that's the industrial revolution, is invention or innovation. Innovation is when you take something that's already been invented and you make it better. The Industrial Revolution hits there, we benefit from it, and eventually comes here. And so that Civil War is going to be very much the first modern war that we have, and not the one anybody expected. But here's the issue, is we discover that wars are awful, terrible, rotten things that are really good for business. When the war is on, war is good for business, and business is good. We learn to manufacture. This is why the North is going to win, folks. They're mechanized. They're industrialized. They've got the factories. The South doesn't even have a decent foundry. The foundries and the steel making and the manufacturing is all up north. We're going to learn to go ahead and mechanize that. We're going to learn to go ahead and step up. And so when the war starts, the North says, oh, we better go ahead and see what we can do. Fact of war is this simple, folks. You cannot have naked, starving, weaponless people running around the battlefield, because it's not a war. And so you've got to feed them, you've got to clothe them, you've got to equip them with weapons and other equipment. That takes factories. That takes industry. And so we ramp up this industry and we stage a good old-fashioned war. We learn to increase production. When the war is over, we don't want to quit increasing production. What we do is we learn about a market economy. We learn about dealing with economies of scale. And the economies of scale is huge. Think about the fact, how many of you actually shop at Walmart or shop at Target? Why? Because it's cheaper. Why is it cheaper? Well, because they can buy things by the millions and sell them, so they can afford to sell them cheaper. Which would you rather have, 100 dimes or 1,000,000 nickels? Give me the 1,000,000 nickels, please. All right? Walmart gets 1,000,000 nickels. Economies of scale is about millions of nickels. It also incorporates the idea of mass production at this particular point. And so we become this mechanized economy. We become this market economy. This because of the invention, because of the innovation. This is when you start to see folks like Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Alva Edison. This is when you see a lot of these folks that are coming in and creating this new economy, creating this new modern version of things. You're going to look at Morse and the Morse code. You're going to look at the telegraph. You're going to look at the transcontinental railroad that's going to come up. What you're going to look at is unbridled industry. We're going to develop an old pattern of business, something called the laissez-faire economy. It's a very old term, and the idea being is it's all about capitalism. The government doesn't belong involved in the economy, doesn't belong involved in the market. Laissez-faire is let happen what will happen. And the idea being is this: we're going to find out that we can manufacture, we can develop, that we can be industrialists, that we can be capitalists. And we're going to learn to do it on a superior scale at this particular point. So we are bordering on the edges of what becomes the Gilded Age. What we're looking at is we're looking at a huge growth in business. When we're looking at railroads, folks, railroads are big money. In order to build a railroad, you have to have tracks. In order to make tracks, you've got to have steel. In order to lay the steel, you've got to have timber, on which to lay the tracks. And so building a railroad requires some big business along the way. So you're going to look at big business people. You're going to look at Vanderbilt. You're going to look at Rockefeller. You're going to look at these big names. They're going to be involved in what become big business. And this is the advent of those business tycoons. This is the advent of what become the huge corporations, what become the huge monopolies. You need to think of two terms. One is vertical integration. The other is horizontal combination. Those are what we utilize in this time period for creating monopolies. Vertical integration is owning business literally. If you're in the steel industry, you own the iron ore and the coal ore and the mines that it comes from. You own very often the means of shipping them. You own them from the ground on up, so you can control your source and your price. Horizontal combination is going to be about buying the outlet for your industry. It's about controlling how many markets and who all puts it out. You're going to come up with some fantastic people that are doing business about this particular time that are going to create these monopolies, which are going to corner the market on some very valuable goods. One of those is going to be oil. So what we look at is, with this birth of big industry, we also look at the beginnings of, well, big government. We start to be involved in antitrust. We start to be involved in unions. We start to be involved in some things where the government is going to reach out and try to control businesses a little bit, try to control investing, try to control corporations. And so we're going to see the advent of, well, what become huge corporations, incredibly rich people. But of course, in order for people to be incredibly rich, they have to have some workers. And unfortunately, those workers are going to be rather poor, because you don't get rich by paying people lots of money to do little bits of work. Two of the things that come up out of this, you look at the gospel of wealth. And the gospel of wealth is huge. That's going to be written by one of those captains of industry. He's going to say, listen, I'm rich, I'm wealthy because, well, God intended it so. It's my right because I worked hard and God blessed me, and so here I am. But you're also going to look at the gospel of what becomes industry, or the gospel of work, to say, hey, listen, not everybody can be rich and disgustingly wealthy like me, because the world needs worker bees too. And it's okay to be a worker bee if God said it should be so, as long as you're putting in a full day's effort for your full day's work. There's a lot of things going on. The other thing you have to look at is, we're going to be looking, we finished one war. Well, we're not happy if we're not fighting, so we're going to start another war. We're going to start the war with the Native Americans, what become the Indian Wars. We're going to take all that really neat technology that we developed for killing people, and we're going to turn it on the Native Americans. We're going to start pushing this whole idea of the westward movement, of displacing those people and putting people of nice, European ancestry on the lands, and pushing the other folks farther out west. The idea being here is, we're going to create what becomes the Homestead Act, and the Homestead Act and the Moral Land Grant Act. And what that's going to do is start pushing people farther west so that we can civilize. And that's what's really important. We can civilize. And as we civilize, what we're going to do is, we're going to start to reach out to those people that are on the bottom rung of the ladder. So you're going to start seeing the rise of Jane Addams and the Hull houses and the settlement houses and things like that. Things that will be the birth of what becomes, I was going to say, the populist movement, but not so much popularism as it is a couple of other things towards socialism. You're also going to see a huge movement among the unions at this particular point, and the rise of what becomes the press for a 40-hour work week. You're going to start looking at some riots. You're going to start looking at some strikes. You're going to start looking at an organized labor movement as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on at this particular point, and it's really being pushed by the Industrial Revolution. We need to manufacture more. To manufacture more, we need more people. Then we need to kind of create, well, in some cases, it's going to be like Ford and creating the assembly line. Ford is pretty smart, because he's going to figure out he can create an assembly line. He can manufacture more things. It's a little bit early for Ford yet, but he's going to be one of those people who's that innovator when it comes to factories. But also, he's going to realize early on that if he doesn't keep his workers happy, that he's going to be running into some other issues. So I'll let you go ahead and jump in and get the reading done on that. Pay attention to the struggles we're starting to have, not only with labor, but also with class and society, and some issues with how we keep up with banking and money. All right, take care.